Why does everyone see you as the reliable one, the stable one, the one who never causes problems, and yet you feel like you're suffocating? You're the person people come to when they need something fixed. You're the one who stays calm in the chaos. You're the good one, the one who doesn't complain, doesn't make demands, doesn't rock the boat. But here's what they don't see: the exhaustion that lives in your bones, the resentment that builds in your chest every time someone assumes you'll just handle it, the way you've become a stranger to your own anger, your own needs, your own authentic voice. Something is rotting beneath all that goodness, and tonight we're going to dig it up. Maybe you've always been the responsible one, the eldest child who raised their siblings, the friend who listens but never speaks, the employee who says yes when they mean no, the partner who gives and gives until there's nothing left. You've tried to understand why you feel so empty when everyone thinks you have it all together. You've read about boundaries, about self-care, about saying no, but every time you try to change, something inside you pulls back. Something whispers that you're being selfish, that you're disappointing people, that you're not good enough unless you're giving everything away. You've become a master at performing contentment while your real self slowly disappears. You smile when you want to scream. You help when you want to hide. You've trained yourself to be so good at being good that you've forgotten what it feels like to be real. Here's the truth you don't want to hear. You're not suffering because you're too giving. You're suffering because you've abandoned yourself. Your goodness has become a prison. Your kindness has become a cage. You've spent so long being what everyone else needed that you've lost track of who you actually are underneath all that performance. You think you're being noble, but you're actually being cowardly. You think you're being selfless, but you're actually terrified of being seen as anything less than perfect. You've turned your entire identity into a shield against the possibility of rejection, and now you're suffocating behind it. Sigmund Freud understood something about human nature that most people refuse to acknowledge. He knew that what we don't express doesn't just disappear. It goes underground, where it festers and grows stronger. Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. Every time you swallow your anger, every time you suppress your frustration, every time you pretend everything is fine when it's not, you're not being good. You're being dishonest, with others and more importantly with yourself. What Freud called repression isn't just a psychological defense mechanism, it's a way of life for people like you. You've repressed so much of your authentic self that you've created what he might call a false self, a version of you that exists only to please others, to avoid conflict, to maintain the illusion of being the good one. But here's what happens when you repress your true emotions, your real needs, your actual desires. They don't disappear. They get pushed down into your unconscious, where they begin to poison everything from the inside out. Your unexpressed anger becomes chronic fatigue. Your unspoken needs become resentment. Your buried desires become depression. Your authentic self becomes a stranger you're afraid to meet. You've become so good at being good that you've forgotten what it costs. And the cost is everything: your energy, your authenticity, your capacity for real intimacy, your ability to feel genuinely alive. If this is speaking to something you've never been able to name, if you're recognizing yourself in these words, then subscribe. Because what we're exploring tonight isn't just psychology, it's the architecture of your own imprisonment. And understanding how you built these walls is the first step toward tearing them down. The people who find these videos are the ones who are tired of surface-level explanations. They want to understand not just what's wrong, but why it's wrong and how they got here. If that's you, then you're in the right place. Let's go deeper. Let's talk about how you became the good one and why it's killing you. You learned early that love was conditional. Maybe it wasn't said explicitly, but you absorbed the message. Good children are loved, difficult children are not. So you became good. You became easy. You became the one who didn't cause problems. But here's what you didn't realize. You were training yourself to disappear. Every time you chose peace over truth, every time you chose harmony over authenticity, you were teaching yourself that your real feelings were dangerous, that your actual needs were selfish, that your true self was unacceptable. You became a master at reading rooms, at sensing what others needed, at being the version of yourself that would be most welcome. But you never learned to read yourself. You never learned to sense what you needed. You never learned to welcome your own complexity. You've become a ghost, haunting your own life. The tragedy isn't that you're giving too much. It's that you're giving from a place of fear, not love. You're giving because you're terrified of what happens if you stop. You're giving because you don't know who you are if you're not useful to someone else. Your goodness has become a performance, and you've been performing for so long that you've forgotten it's a performance. You've confused being needed with being loved. You've confused being useful with being valuable. You've confused being good with being real. But Freud knew something else. The unconscious always finds a way to express itself. Those repressed emotions, those buried needs, those suppressed desires, they're not gone. They're finding other ways to emerge. Maybe it's the inexplicable rage that surfaces when someone takes your kindness for granted. Maybe it's the way you feel hollow after doing everything right. Maybe it's the secret fantasies you have about disappearing, about being someone else, about living a completely different life. Maybe it's the way you sometimes catch yourself in the mirror and think, I don't know who that person is. Your unconscious is trying to tell you something. Your repressed emotions are trying to break through. Your authentic self is trying to be born, but you keep pushing it down, keep smoothing it over, keep being good instead of being real. You're not broken, you're buried. The person you really are is still in there, underneath all that performance. But they're suffocating, they're screaming, but you've trained yourself not to hear them. They're trying to live, but you've convinced yourself that their existence would be selfish, difficult, unacceptable. You wear a smile that hides a scream. You offer help that masks a plea. You give comfort while you're drowning, and you call it being good. But what if goodness without authenticity is just another form of lying? What if kindness without boundaries is just another form of self-harm? What if being the good one is actually the most dangerous thing you could be? So what now? How do you begin to excavate a self you've been burying your entire life? Start by noticing the moments when you betray yourself. When you say yes but mean no. When you smile but want to cry. When you help but feel used. When you're good but feel dead inside. Those moments are doorways. They're your unconscious trying to break through. They're your authentic self trying to be born. Notice what you're afraid would happen if you stopped being so good. What are you really afraid of? Rejection? Abandonment? Conflict? Being seen as difficult? Selfish? Too much? Those fears are the bars of your cage. They're the reasons you've imprisoned yourself in goodness. They're the beliefs that keep you performing instead of living. And here's the hardest question. What if the people who only love you when you're being good don't actually love you at all? What if they love the service you provide, the role you play, the function you fulfill, but not the person you are? What if your goodness is actually enabling other people's selfishness? What if your inability to say no is teaching others that you don't matter? What if your constant availability is making you invisible? Your repressed emotions are trying to tell you something essential. You matter. Your needs matter. Your desires matter. Your authentic self matters. But you'll never know this until you stop abandoning yourself for the comfort of others. What was the truth that shook you? What did you recognize about yourself that you've been afraid to name? Write it below. Sometimes the act of naming something is the first step toward changing it. Here's what Freud understood, and what you're just beginning to see. Your unconscious is not your enemy. Your repressed emotions are not your problem. Your authentic self is not your weakness. The problem is the system you've built to keep them underground. The problem is the false self you've constructed to be acceptable, manageable, good. You think you're protecting yourself by being the good one, but you're actually destroying yourself. You think you're avoiding pain by repressing your truth, but you're actually creating a deeper, more persistent pain, the pain of self-abandonment. Your unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive, and they will come forth later in uglier ways. But they don't have to be ugly. They don't have to be destructive. They can be powerful. They can be transformative. They can be the fuel for a life that's actually yours. The question isn't whether you'll stop being the good one. The question is whether you'll start being the real one. Will you continue to suffocate behind your goodness, or will you finally allow yourself to breathe? Will you keep performing a version of yourself that everyone else approves of, or will you start living as the person you actually are? Your authentic self is not waiting for permission. It's not waiting for the right time. It's not waiting for other people to change. It's waiting for you to stop being so afraid of your own power, your own complexity, your own truth. The good one was never real. It was always a mask. The question is, what happens when you finally take it off? You have a choice. You've always had a choice. You can keep burying yourself alive in goodness, or you can start the difficult, necessary work of excavating who you really are. The person you've been is not the person you have to remain. The patterns you've lived are not the patterns you have to repeat. The cage you've built is not the home you have to keep, but you have to choose. And you have to choose now, because every day you spend being the good one is another day you're not being the real one. And time is the one thing you can't get back. What will you choose? Don't stop here. This is just the beginning of understanding how you've been living as a stranger to yourself. The next video continues what we started tonight. It's about what happens when you finally stop performing and start living. The path forward isn't about becoming someone new, it's about becoming who you've always been, underneath all that performance, and that journey starts now.